Hey guys, I'm going to talk today about adding detail to your drawing. So you should have all of your basic shapes all set at this point. Now we're going to add in some of the smaller parts and more details. So if you can see here, I already implemented some colored pencils. This was kind of confusing here. This took me a little while to draw. I used colored pencils to help me separate areas. The number one technique to help when you have something complicated is to divide a box in half and in half again. So I just realized you can't really see what I'm looking at right here. There is a rectangle, some kind of opening on the side of this phone case. Because it's floating in the middle of this shape here, and there's no intersections that it touches, it's difficult to judge exactly where that goes. The number one technique when you're struggling with shapes is to divide a box in half and in half again. So right now I'm making 2 marks at 1/2 inch to connect. Just like before, we always connect 2 sets of marks. And I'm going to do the same across. After I've done that on here, I also need to do that on my drawing paper. So that was E5, so I'm coming over to E5, and I'm going to do the same thing. Make a mark at 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. I want to make these light because they're going to be erased in the end. But I also want you to be able to see them. All right, so I've got this shape here that I'm drawing in this box. So what I can see now that I've divided this in half and in half is I can actually see that the bottom edge of my phone is just a little too low. It almost exactly goes through the intersection here. So if I wanted to do this right, I could technically move this up just a smidge. Before I get started. Okay, so this opening in the phone case, when it crosses over in E5 from the left to the right side, it's about 1/3 of the way down in this new smaller box. It crosses through almost exactly at the intersection. The right side goes about 2/3 of the way over, and the left side just a little more than half of the way over. And it makes a rectangular shape. With some soft rounded edges. Okay, once I have that set, I can then erase these extra grid lines. So if you're struggling with something, your number one step is to divide that box in half on your image first, divide it in half on your drawing paper next, so you can better see where things go. All right, the next thing I want to show you is using colored pencils or markers or highlighters. So here I traced this one in pink and this one in orange to help me draw them originally, and that was very helpful. Now I want to look at this design here. It's pretty complicated zigzag design. There's a lot of them. So what I've done is, just like in my toilet paper demonstration, I highlighted 1, skipped 3, highlighted 1, skipped 3. What I'm going to do now is I am going to try to draw the green ones, every third one. I'm actually going to connect this here, this line here, which is the top of a zigzag. I'm going to do that first. I think that might help me a little bit. All right, my first green shape is up here in A1, down, up, down, up. Next one is towards the top of B1. And I'm connecting those little lines I drew. That's what I did that for. That little line I drew here is at the top of one of my zigzags. I messed up. Now, if you've got something that is really difficult like this and you're really struggling, you can simplify. You don't have to draw every little detail as you see it. So I'm going to concentrate on the zigzag lines just on these front 2 or 3 bits of the cord. The rest of them I'm going to pretend don't really exist. Got an extra line here. You'll see I divided a lot of these squares in half and in half earlier when I was drawing this. I drew that line in there again. That's going to help me know where to change the direction of my zigzags. Okay, so I have every third one drawn, and the reason why I did that is because now I can start to place the in-between ones, and I don't necessarily have to look at my image now. What I can do is I can draw one in between and just kind of estimate an eyeball, find the middle of each of these spaces that I drew. And draw a new one. I could even pretend that this is what my design looks like and not add in the ones in between if I wanted to simplify. Because right now they're pretty evenly spaced. I have a nice pattern going. And I could do that all the way around. Or if I wanted to challenge myself and keep it looking just like this, I could now go in between each one of these and do one more. Messed that one up. And they all should line up and look pretty similar. Okay, the last thing I want to show you how to do is writing. All right, so this is a printout of somebody who had their basic shapes done. I'm going to use this one as an example because it has a lot of writing right here. So we've talked about this briefly in class before. The first thing you're going to do here is you're going to draw a box around these letters. So I highlighted the word elevation in yellow. I drew a box around these two. I drew a box around above C. I'm going to do the same thing here for each section. If it's easier to get a different color, you can do that. Then what you do on your drawing, instead of drawing letters first, you're drawing boxes. So that 5,267 feet, I know that that box goes right through this intersection. The right side of it ends maybe a third of the way over. The left side of it ends Almost 2/3 of the way over. Now I'm going to draw the green highlighted area. There's more of it to the left than there is the right. The left side of it is a little more than 2/3 of the way over. It crosses that line. It comes down about 1/3 of the way over here. Then I should next draw a box around $250. Fine. Come over here and draw that same box. The corner of it goes through this intersection right here. Top of it about halfway. So you see, before I draw any lines whatsoever, I am plotting my course. Playing connect the dots here. Drawing basic shapes is difficult enough. We're going to do that first before we try to do the really hard part, which is drawing all of those letters in there. So only after I've drawn all of these shapes, first on my image, second on my drawing, only then will I start to worry about writing my letters. And before I start writing my letters, I'm going to divide these boxes even further. The word elevation, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 letters. The A is right in the center, so I'm going to start with the A. And before I go any further, what I've realized is I drew my box too far to the right and not far enough to the left. So what I would do next to double check all of these before I start putting my letters in here, and I probably should have done first, I will divide all of these boxes in half and in half, divide these boxes in half and in half to check before I put my letters in there. One more example, a little bit easier. NYS here. I draw the box around NYS up here. I then draw that shape down here. Goes over 2/3 of the way. Almost touches the left here. Okay, now that I have a box that matches the one I drew up here, I can divide it further. For this one, why not? There's only 3 letters. I'll divide it into 3 boxes. If I'm happy with how that looks, then I can start putting my letters in there. The S I made a little skinny, should be a little wider, so I'm just going to add to what I have there to make it thicker. They're really short letters, but they're really wide. The Y is just to the left of that grid line. The right side crosses. Okay. So, number 1 step is dividing boxes in half and in half. That is your number 1 step if you're struggling with anything. Your number 2 step is to draw boxes around more difficult shapes, especially letters. And number 3 for patterns is to color code your patterns. It's nice to to draw 1, skip 3, draw 1, skip 3, because then you can do a middle one and fill in those spaces accordingly. I'm going to be happy to answer more questions when we get back in class. You guys got this.